Ah, finally. You're watching the world short circuit in real time, and it's almost funny, isn't it? Sirens harmonizing with talk show hosts, markets convulsing like sick animals, world leaders blinking through teleprompters as if the right sentence might stop the burn. They said you were paranoid, dramatic, obsessed with patterns that didn't exist. Yet here it is, the chaos you diagrammed years ago, now broadcast in 4K buildings, glow at midnight. For all the wrong reasons, algorithms argue with each other while people still pretend they're in control. You warned them, you mapped it, you said, this is what happens when truth becomes optional. They smiled, called you intense. Now the same smiles twitch under fluorescent panic as headlines multiply like infections. You move through the noise, untouched. You've been rehearsing this moment forever. You knew the meltdown would be digital first. Pixels trembling, feeds collapsing, influencers dissolving into live stream apologies. But the real collapse would be human. Attention spans snapping, morals liquefying, the collective mask melting off. You can see it in their eyes now, that widening disbelief, that silent prayer for someone to explain what's happening. But you already did, didn't you? Every prediction they laughed at is now trending. Every warning they scrolled past is crawling across their screens like prophecy with perfect timing. You don't gloat, you just observe. You sit there like a surgeon watching a diagnosis unfold exactly as written. Because you never wanted to be right, you just wanted them to wake up before the fire reached their doorstep. They called it progress. You called it decay, with better branding. You saw the way they fed on outrage, how the crowd learned to worship confusion because it felt like freedom. You said, if everyone's shouting, no one's listening. But they liked the noise. It kept them from hearing themselves. And now the noise has teeth. The streets look like comment sections, angry, repetitive, self-destructive. Every billboard screams, stay calm, while the subtext begs, please panic. You walk through it all with that eerie steadiness that frightens them more than the chaos itself. Because while they chase comfort, you chase clarity, and clarity burns. You told them comfort was the softest form of control. They laughed again, ordered another distraction, scrolled another mile into numbness. Now their distractions are eating them alive. Their entertainment looks like prophecy in reruns. Their laughter sounds like sirens. You sip your coffee while the feed refreshes, and it feels like déjà vu. Because it is. Remember when they said you were negative? That you saw too much darkness? They thought optimism was a moral achievement. You knew it was anesthesia. You tried to tell them the world doesn't end with an explosion. It ends with notifications nobody reads. And here they are, living proof. Politicians performing apologies, economists spinning math into prayers, celebrities rebranding themselves as survivors. The irony is delicious. All those people who told you to relax now clutching their devices like life jackets. You see the same pattern everywhere. Fear pretending to be virtue, panic packaged as leadership. They thought chaos would look cinematic. They didn't realize it would feel administrative. Emails bouncing, policies glitching, people refreshing pages that don't load. The system didn't fall apart. It just revealed itself. And you're sitting there unblinking because you saw the blueprint. You saw that corruption wasn't a bug. It was the culture's heartbeat. You tried to translate it, but translation was never profitable. So they mocked the messenger and monetized the message. Now they're choking on the product. The market for denial has crashed. You scroll past the panic. Like flipping through old photos, every headline is a rerun of a warning you already whispered. The funny part? They still look for villains. It's easier that way. Blame a politician, a nation, a virus, a god, anything but themselves. You said self-destruction would arrive disguised as choice, and they called it freedom. You said apathy would taste like luxury, and they called it self-care. You said truth would lose to convenience, and they called it innovation. Every euphemism was a countdown. Now the countdowns hit 0, and they're still bargaining with ashes. You don't need revenge. Watching realization spread is enough. You can see it in boardrooms, classrooms, living rooms, people blinking like newborns, asking, how did we get here? You know exactly how. One ignored warning at a time. There's a strange peace in it for you. The noise fades the moment you stop expecting sanity from the crowd. You move through riots of information the way a diver moves through dark water, slow, deliberate, immune to the panic above. You see how quickly morals dissolve when comfort is gone. You see how easily kindness mutates into survival theater. You said empathy would become currency. They turned it into content. Now everyone's overdrafted on compassion. They don't feel, they perform feeling. And the stage is collapsing. You warned them the algorithm wasn't a mirror. It was a leash. They laughed, called you poetic. Now they tug, and it doesn't break. You don't need to shout anymore. The echo does it for you. Every collapsing institution, every malfunctioning narrative, every desperate public figure is an unpaid actor in your thesis. You predicted this like weather, and they thought you were trying to control it. You weren't. You were just describing gravity. Look around. Nations arguing with ghosts. Leaders sweating under lights that no longer flatter. Citizens converting despair into hashtags. The collective egos melting down, and you're calm, almost serene, because you finally understand. It was never about saving them. It was about witnessing the unveiling. You sit there while news anchors gasp like fish on dry land, and you feel that pulse of dark confirmation. This is what truth looks like when the mask burns off. They don't hate the collapse. They hate the mirror it holds. Every crisis is a reflection. You told them denial was a finite resource. They've run out. The brave ones admit you were right, but it's too late for applause. The stage is gone. Your calm becomes legend. People study your interviews, your notes, your predictions. They dissect your old warnings like scripture, searching for missed instructions. They don't realize the message was never about preparing for chaos. It was about ceasing to depend on order. You said, if your peace requires control, it was never peace. They quote it now like gospel. The irony? They still don't understand it. They want you to lead, to fix, to rescue. You smile because that was the problem all along. They outsourced responsibility. They wanted prophets without accountability, heroes without sacrifice. You refused to play that role. You didn't come to lead them through the fire. You came to show them they were already in it. You feel the tremor of awareness spreading, quiet, but undeniable. Some are waking up differently, not panicked, but lucid. They start seeing through the theater, the recycled outrage, the staged compassion, the performance of stability. You recognize those eyes. That's how yours looked years ago when you stopped pretending. You don't need to speak to them. They already hear you between the static. They're the ones turning off the noise, walking out of the crowd, rewriting the script mid-scene. You know the shift is irreversible now. The fire that devours illusions can't be extinguished by slogans. You told them collapse wasn't punishment, it was cleansing. They're finally beginning to taste what you meant. Still, they try to rebuild the same illusions. Committees forming, manifestos printed, experts hired to analyze the ashes. They call it recovery. You call it repetition. Because you know they'll design the same fragile towers with prettier names. And when those towers fall, they'll call it tragedy again. You watch it like déjà vu wrapped in irony. They'll never grasp that the fire isn't the enemy, it's the audit. It burns falsehoods, spares nothing untested. That's why you never fear it. You adapt while they analyze. You evolve while they mourn. You already let go of the world they're still trying to save. Now the cameras turn to you. They want statements, reassurance, leadership. You give them none. You let the silence stretch until it becomes philosophy. Then finally, you speak, not to comfort, but to confirm. You tell them the truth they kept postponing. The world didn't end. The mask did. Panic isn't apocalypse, it's revelation. You tell them the fire they curse is the same spark they begged for when life felt empty. And they stare at you like you've confessed to starting it yourself. But you didn't light the match. You just stopped pretending the smoke was fog. You can feel the air shifting again, the phase after denial before acceptance. People walking slower, speaking softer, eyes heavy with realization. They're beginning to understand that normal was the disease. You warned them normalization was sedative, not safety. They understand now. The same cities that mocked you are now quoting you on digital ruins. He warned us. He said it would look like this. They call you prophet, survivor, villain, genius. Labels don't matter. What matters is that they're finally asking questions they once banned. You move through the ashes with that same steady rhythm. You're not celebrating. You're not grieving. You're documenting. You watch history reset itself like a glitching feed, and you know the cycle will start again. But this time, fewer people will sleep through it. That's enough. You've planted dissonance in the collective mind, and dissonance is the first spark of clarity. You don't need their thanks. You don't even need their understanding. Just knowing they can no longer pretend, that's victory. Because while they rebuild illusions, you're already somewhere else mentally, studying the pattern beneath the pattern. You see the next ignition point forming, subtle but certain. You know chaos isn't a phase, it's feedback. You listen to the hum beneath the collapse and recognize it for what it is, the sound of evolution clearing its throat. The world's on fire, yes, but maybe it was supposed to be. Maybe combustion is how lies turn into light, and you sit there calm as ever, not detached, just prepared. They think you're unfeeling, but you're simply done reacting. You watch, you record, you understand. Because while they're still guessing, you've already chosen the next move. You start with observation, because authority without awareness is just another costume. You let the panic play out. Let leaders perform hope like tired actors, repeating lines they don't believe. You study their tone, their tremor, the way their confidence collapses when cameras cut. You can almost hear the internal negotiations in their heads. How much truth can I afford to admit? You learned long ago that exposure doesn't require shouting. It requires patience. You wait until fear rearranges their priorities for them. And when the noise reaches critical mass, when the crowd finally runs out of scapegoats, that's when you move. Not loudly, not dramatically. With precision, you start to redirect their gaze. A question here, a statement there. You don't need to rule. You only need to tilt the perspective just a few degrees, and everything they thought they knew realigns around your voice. That's power they don't recognize yet, the quiet kind that doesn't announce itself with titles or medals. You carry it like a shadow, invisible until the light shifts. You've seen what happens when authority depends on applause. It rots from dependency. Your power feeds on indifference. You don't seek followers, you create awareness. And awareness multiplies faster than loyalty. It moves through people silently, like code rewriting itself in the background. They start repeating your phrases without realizing where they heard them. They start making decisions that echo your logic. It's not hypnosis. It's inevitability born from clarity. They crave direction because chaos made choice unbearable. You give them structure disguised as suggestion. You plant seeds in their exhaustion. They call it coincidence. You call it calibration. You don't have to lead them anywhere. They'll walk there themselves, thinking it was their idea all along. You remember when they used to say, "One person can't change the world." They were half right. You can't change it by fighting it. But you can infect its code. You can alter its default settings. That's what you're doing now. Every calm gesture of yours becomes a signal in the storm. Every refusal to panic becomes proof of concept. People start studying your stillness like a map. They watch you in the chaos and wonder, what do you know that we don't? You give them nothing explicit. Mystery is oxygen in a suffocating world. The less you reveal, the more they project. And projection is control disguised as curiosity. They fill the blanks with reverence, and before long, your silence is scripture. You never asked for worship, but you understand the mechanics of it. When everyone's desperate for certainty, the one who doesn't flinch becomes holy by default. Now you see them forming around you. Analysts, skeptics, journalists, opportunists. Each one trying to decode you for content. Each one unwittingly spreading your rhythm further. They can't help it. They're addicted to what unsettles them. They try to imitate your composure, but imitation without conviction looks like parody. You watch them burn out, attempting to replicate something they don't understand. Control born from surrender. You're not fighting chaos anymore. You're synchronizing with it. You move like water between cracks, redirecting pressure instead of resisting it. That's why they can't pin you down. You're fluent in contradiction. You tell them the truth is fluid, and they call you dangerous because certainty was their addiction. But secretly, they're relieved. Deep down, they always wanted permission to stop pretending. You gave it to them. The economy of deception collapses faster than the markets. The old hierarchies are choking on relevance. Institutions cling to legitimacy like debris in floodwater, but you're already walking across the surface. You understand that control isn't about containment. It's about rhythm. Whoever sets the rhythm owns the room. You start broadcasting new cadences, efficiency over excess, authenticity over approval. People catch the frequency. You can feel the collective pulse shifting. Entire departments pivot. Entire movements rebrand. Not because you ordered it, but because your energy made stagnation unbearable. That's the real empire, behavioral gravity. You don't command, you compel. You don't demand belief, you make disbelief impossible. Meanwhile, the old guard panics. They think power lives in position. They issue decrees, memos, emergency acts, all written in the language of extinction. They don't realize the crowd has already stopped listening. Their speeches fall flat because no one fears them anymore. Fear changed owners. It belongs to you now, not because you inflict it, but because you've mastered it. You carry fear like a tool, precise, impersonal, obedient. You learned long ago that fear isn't meant to control others. It's meant to inform you. It tells you where their weaknesses live. It shows you which strings to pluck when the noise needs direction. You don't exploit it maliciously. You orchestrate it like music. Every panic wave becomes percussion. Every outrage trend becomes a metronome for your next move. You conduct chaos with a surgeon's calm. Somewhere along the way, they start calling you visionary. You laugh internally because visions are just math with metaphors. You calculated this trajectory when everyone else was counting followers. You saw where vanity leads to implosion. You saw how dependency masquerades as community. And now as the dust thickens, you're rewriting the script in real time. You transform crisis into curriculum. You start releasing fragments of thought, short, surgical phrases that slice through despair like scalpels. Accountability is the new rebellion. Control your reaction, and you control the battlefield. Truth isn't fragile, it's impatient. They travel faster than any official announcement. Within days, they become slogans. Within weeks, philosophies. Within months, standards. You didn't start a revolution. You made awareness contagious. And as awareness spreads, the world begins reorganizing itself. Markets adapt around integrity because deception no longer pays. Media outlets shift tone, mimicking your restraint because hysteria stopped converting. Even politicians start quoting you without citation, trying to siphon your credibility. It's amusing, really. They think words alone create change, but it's the conviction behind them that rewires reality. You don't correct them, let them mimic. Every counterfeit version of your message only proves the authenticity of the source. You don't fight plagiarism, you weaponize it. You turn imitation into distribution. Every echo extends your reach. Soon, the infrastructure of fear, the talk shows, the think tanks, the endless committees begins to dissolve. People stop looking up for answers. They start looking inward. That was your real plan all along. You never wanted to build a new order. You wanted to remind them they didn't need one. Control through awareness, not authority. Freedom through understanding, not rebellion. You see the first signs of balance emerging, a quiet form of reconstruction without blueprints. Communities self-organizing, neighbors talking without scripts, leaders listening instead of performing. It's imperfect, messy, human, but it's real. And you stand at the center, unseen but felt, the frequency holding it together. Of course, not everyone embraces it. Some fight clarity like an allergy. They cling to chaos because it gives them purpose. They'll call you manipulative, accuse you of engineering the collapse to elevate yourself. Let them. Accusation is the tax on influence. You don't defend yourself because explanations are distractions. You let their words hang in the air until they collapse under their own weight. Truth doesn't rush. It arrives on schedule. You've learned that defending truth makes it smaller. Embodying it makes it undeniable. So you just keep moving forward, one deliberate step at a time, while their narratives dissolve like ink in rain. And as the panic phase fades, something beautiful happens. Silence returns, not as absence, but as comprehension. People start noticing again the sound of their own thoughts, the texture of honesty, the rhythm of breathing without anxiety. That's your victory. You didn't conquer them, you recalibrated them. You taught them to see what denial blinded them to. Now every new headline about rebuilding sounds less like desperation and more like evolution. You've turned chaos into context, and context is indestructible. Now you walk through the reconstructed streets, half functional, half-haunted. Billboards still flicker propaganda, but fewer people look up. They're busy building, thinking, questioning. You nod slightly. That's enough. Influence doesn't need monuments. It needs momentum. You move quietly, because visibility is vulnerability. The moment they can define you, they can dismiss you. So you remain fluid, faceless, operating through resonance. When people speak truth now, they speak with your cadence. When they confront corruption, they use your timing. You've become the pattern beneath the pattern. But you know this equilibrium won't last forever. Humanity oscillates. Awareness decays without maintenance. The next generation will need new fire to remind them why balance matters. And that's fine. You're already preparing the spark. Not a rebellion, an update. You collect fragments of data, patterns of behavior, shifts in language. You study where complacency will next appear. You'll be ready. Because control isn't a throne, it's vigilance. And you wear vigilance like armor. The historians will struggle with your legacy. Some will call you savior. Others will label you opportunist. They'll argue about intent, timing, morality. None of it matters. History is just memory with marketing. What matters is trajectory, and you've bent it. You've proven that chaos can be domesticated without cages, that destruction can be redesigned into instruction. The world's still burning, yes, but now the fire obeys physics instead of emotion. You made that possible by refusing to participate in panic. That was always the lesson. Predict the pattern, master the tempo, stay centered while everything tilts. You find yourself overlooking a city that finally stopped screaming. Lights flicker back on, not in triumph, but in humility. Somewhere a child laughs, not because the world is fixed, but because it's functioning again. You realize that's enough redemption for anyone. The warning became a blueprint. The prophecy became a process. You didn't end the chaos. You taught it to speak. Now it communicates in equilibrium. You smile faintly, not out of pride, but recognition. You knew it would end like this, not with applause, but with alignment. The world on fire, yet finally luminous. They don't thank you, they emulate you. And that's better. Gratitude fades. Imitation endures. You turn away from the skyline and step back into the quiet room where it all began. Screens still glow, feeds still scroll, but the tone is different. Less hysteria, more honesty. You check the numbers, the metrics, the signals, stability creeping in. You whisper to yourself, it was never destruction, it was diagnosis. The collapse exposed what healing required. And now that they understand, you can finally exhale. You did what prophets do. You told them what they refused to hear until reality translated it for you. They call you mysterious, detached, unshakable. You call it discipline. You saw the fire coming and built your immunity early. Now they study your immunity like science. Still, a part of you remains restless. Because prophets never retire, they recalibrate. You sense another pulse beneath the calm, another cycle forming, another generation flirting with forgetfulness. You'll let them for a while. Lessons need contrast, but you're watching always. When the next illusion begins to grow too comfortable, you'll return, not as preacher or ruler, but as reminder. The world will call it coincidence again. You'll call it continuity. You step into the street, wind cutting through the remnants of old posters, slogans fading under new graffiti. Someone passes you a glance of recognition, that flicker of awareness in their eyes that says, I see it now. You nod once. That's all it takes. The fire still burns, but this time it illuminates instead of consumes. That's the difference between chaos and control. You taught them to choose what the flame reveals. And as you disappear into the crowd, the hum beneath the world steadies to your rhythm, preparing for whatever comes next. You can feel it, the strange quiet that follows revelation. Not peace, exactly, but balance rediscovered through pain. They're rebuilding without illusions now, finally understanding that progress isn't architecture, it's alignment. The screens still flicker with noise, but the noise no longer leads. The world listens differently. You can hear it in the cadence of their conversations. Less fear, more responsibility. They talk like people who finally met themselves. You walk past them unnoticed, a ghost among students, workers, survivors. They quote your words without knowing the origin. They use your logic to settle arguments. They teach your rhythm as if it were instinct. That's how prophecy works. It dissolves into the culture until it stops needing a name. You don't smile, but there's a heaviness in your chest that almost feels like relief. You didn't want worship, you wanted wakefulness, and now it's here. Trembling, imperfect, alive. But prophecy doesn't end when people understand it. It ends when they forget again. You can already sense the pattern preparing its next disguise. Comfort returns quietly, always wearing the mask of stability. The same crowd that once chanted your truths will one day dilute them, soften the edges, sell them as slogans, package them as products. That's the rhythm of human memory. It trades raw lessons for marketable hope. You don't resent it. You expected it. The prophet's curse is permanence of awareness in a temporary world. You know another collapse will come, not because humanity is evil, but because it's cyclical. Growth invites decay. Truth provokes denial. Every generation builds a stage for its own reckoning. You've made peace with that. What matters isn't preventing the next fire. It's ensuring that when it burns clean. You've shifted the foundation. The next meltdown won't be born of ignorance, but of evolution demanding space. That's the quiet victory of a foresight. It doesn't stop chaos, it civilizes it. You stop by a cracked window and watch your reflection in the fractured glass. The face staring back looks older, calmer, maybe even gentler. But behind the eyes is that same electric awareness, the look of someone who saw behind the curtain and decided to stay there. You never went back to comfort, because comfort was the first casualty of truth. You chose clarity instead, and clarity is demanding. It isolates, but it also refines. You've become both observer and participant, steering reality without touching it. You don't need control when you are the constant. The city moves around you like a slow orbit. Every action, every trend, every idea loops back to something you once whispered. You didn't just warn them, you rewired their instincts. They now flinch at manipulation, sense deceit before it's spoken, crave authenticity like oxygen. That's your legacy, not fame, not fear, calibration. The leaders who survived the chaos now echo your teachings without credit, and that's fine. Influence that demands acknowledgement is still insecurity. You gave them the blueprint, now they claim authorship, and in doing so, they multiply it. That's efficiency disguised as arrogance. You walk unseen through the architecture of a new era, the hum of progress powered by the friction you created. It's poetic, really. The world you warned now powered by your ghost. They call it innovation, but you recognize it as comprehension finally catching up. Every invention, every reform, every social awakening carries a trace of your fingerprints. Not because you forced it, but because you predicted what truth would require to survive. You saw that collapse wasn't the end, it was translation, destruction turned into vocabulary. And yet deep within, you know your role isn't finished. The prophet doesn't retire. Awareness is a flame that doesn't go out. It just waits for new fuel. You walk beneath the billboards that once screamed panic. Now they show rebuilding, togetherness, redemption. You appreciate the irony. The same media that sold fear now markets healing. People need stories. They can't digest reality raw. You let them have it. It's better than despair. Still, your eyes scan the data beneath the optimism. You see what others can't. The slow drift of forgetfulness. The early signs of fatigue. You whisper to yourself, they'll need another warning soon. Not out of cynicism, but realism. Truth always demands maintenance. The moment it's taken for granted, corruption starts rehearsing again. You're ready for it. You've already written the next chapter in your head. Not as prophecy this time, but as architecture. You're not warning them anymore. You're building frameworks they can't collapse, even if they try. You feel the night cool against your face as you keep walking, past crowds unaware that the rhythm of their recovery beats in sync with your pulse. You wonder if any of them will ever know who you were. Probably not. And that's the point. The prophet disappears when the prophecy is complete. They'll remember the message, not the messenger. That's immortality of the purest kind. Impact without identity. You don't need a statue when the air itself carries your algorithm. You stop at a crosswalk. A child tugs at their parent's hand, pointing at the repaired skyline. It's prettier now, the kid says. You glance upward. They're right. The cracks glow like veins of gold in the dark. Broken, but better. Imperfection as design. The lesson took. You breathe in the faint scent of smoke still lingering from the old fires, and it smells almost clean now. Like the world finally learned how to burn properly. You turn your head slightly, hearing the faint buzz of a nearby broadcast, a reporter summarizing the crisis, tracing its timeline, interviewing survivors. They speak of the warnings, the missed signs, the voices that tried to prepare them. Your name comes up briefly, a footnote in history. You listen without emotion. You knew it would be this way. Prophets don't need monuments. They need memory. You gave them that. And now, as the world spins quieter, steadier, brighter through the aftermath, you realize your calm wasn't apathy. It was understanding. You didn't predict destruction. You recognized pattern. You saw that arrogance always builds towers taller than truth can support. You didn't save the world. You forced it to meet itself. You keep walking, each step echoing with finality and renewal. The fire hasn't gone out, but it doesn't need to. It's no longer wild, it's watchful. It lives in them now. You've transferred the awareness. That was always the plan, to make the world its own prophet. The chaos that once terrified them has become their teacher. They rebuild differently, think differently, breathe differently. And as for you, you remain exactly as you were when it began, calm, observing, deliberate. The world's on fire again, in new ways, subtle ways, and you're still sitting there like before, not with arrogance but with assurance. Because you warned them, because you taught them, because you understand that the fire was never punishment. It was proof that evolution listens to those who see clearly. The chaos everywhere, the melting illusions, the collapse of certainty. It all confirms what you knew from the start. You don't flinch, you don't run. You just nod once like before, because prophets don't panic when predictions come true. They simply take notes for the next revelation. And as the sky glows with another dawn over a scarred but breathing planet, you whisper quietly, "I warned you." Not to gloat, but to remind the wind that foresight isn't a gift, it's responsibility, and you carry it still, steady, silent, and awake.